Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor. Last week we looked at Slackware Linux, which was a Slackware based distribution made from Greece. But this week I'm going to be looking at Slackware itself. Now initially last week I wanted to do Slackware for you, but I kept running into so many problems that I just gave up and decided let's try a different version based on it to see if that might help out. Well, after I did my video last week, there were a few subscribers that gave me some great hints and tricks as to how to manipulate Slackware and to get the features that I was looking for. So before I go any further, I'd like to thank those couple subscribers, Woodruff42, Linux User 119, and Gaming Videos RS. Thank you three very much for your comments. Because of those comments, I was able to easily get Simple Screen Recorder working once I got 32-bit libraries installed. And because of the 32-bit libraries, the issue with Skype suddenly disappeared, and I was able to get that to run as well, not knowing and not realizing, because I didn't dive too deep into it, that Skype was a 32-bit application. It installed without any errors, and the type of error that I would get when I would try to run it was just saying that it couldn't find the right file. After getting the compatible 32-bit drivers and libraries installed, however, it suddenly started to work. So I thank you very much again for all of your comments, because when I run into an issue like this, it's very helpful to have those. So here's Slackware. Slackware really is a great distribution in the fact that it is one of the oldest that's out there. It's very stable, and because it's stable, it's not going to have the latest and greatest. I believe this right now is running KDE 4.8.5 and a lot of the older packages. Now you could change the repositories over from 14.0 to current, and you can get 4.10.4. I decided for now, let's just leave it as it is and give a good review regarding this. Two of the first things though that I did with Slackware after I got it installed was to go ahead and install gslapt and Sorcery. I'll look at those real quick, even though I mentioned them in Slackle. Some of you may not have watched that, so I'll just go over them again. gslapt is a graphic interface to the slapt-get program, which is a package manager for Slackware. Now Slackware doesn't have a package manager of its own. To install a package, you normally have to download a TGZ file, and then you have to use install pkg at the command line, and then if you're lucky and there are no dependencies needed, it will install and work. Now, that said, that's still an issue with Slackware. Because there's no proper package manager and no good dependency program system, there are some problems trying to find the right packages sometimes, or if you're looking for something new that might not be created just yet for Slackware, you're going to have some problems. With gslapt, you can look for files such as, I like Clementine, and so I went searching for it and I found it and I went ahead and installed it. Now one of the other things that I did was I checked to see what type of repositories the last system was using, and because a lot of good packages were coming from Salix, I went ahead and added Salix as a repository, and then of course we have the Slackware 14.0 repositories, and I believe that when I installed slapt-get and gslapt, it came with the softwarejaos.org Slack packs installed as well. From there, we can find many different packages that will look for the dependencies for certain systems and install them as well as the package you're looking for. When you run into a problem that you can't find the package, the best thing to do is go to the backup, which is called Sorcery, and in here you're going to find applications that you'll be able to install. It'll try to install them source code, for instance, And to give you an example, I believe it was TuxRacer that I was looking for to install. Here it was, and I was able then to have it download the source code and compile it. Now, one thing to note about Extreme TuxRacer, it worked, but I had no sound. And from a Gen 2 standpoint, though, I knew that it needed something to do with SDL sound, which I was then able to go back into GSlap and look up SDL, and found SDL sound as a package. Once I installed SDL sound, then the sound worked fine within Extreme TuxRacer. So there's some bouncing back and forth that you need to do to be able to install some applications, but for the most part, everything is there. You're just going to have a little bit of an issue if you go outside of the normal realm. Slackware has some great documentation on the slackware.com site, although like I said in Slackle last week, some of the complaints that I did have was that when you went to some of the documentation in here, it was pointing to things that were really outdated and no longer usable in today's day and age with hardware. I don't need to know about floppy disks anymore, and I don't need to know about some of the other things that they discuss with in regards to hardware that is going back to the 486 days. Those sort of things really need to be updated, and I do know that there is some new documentation that they're working on, and hopefully that will kind of bring Slackware into the 21st century. As for packages, I did change the package look so that it has just this simple look and feel. It's easier to be able to display packages. I'm not going to go too far into it because it's very similar to Slackle, but if you'll notice, compared to what Slackle had, which also had the Qt4, this has a lot more to offer. There are a lot more applications. Now, I installed the full version so I'd get everything that it thought I would need, and that came with a lot more things than Slackle did. Slackle had the Qt4 up here, but this has KDevelop, which is a great IDE, and a lot of other features that you can see here. If we move on, if you remember, in the education area, they had KMarble, and this one has much more than just KMarble. All along here, I guess that's not KMarble, but just Marble that Slackle had. A lot of different applications. The nice thing about this is when you don't know what you want, it's great to have the option to have it all given to you. You start to learn which applications are most important to you, which ones you use the most, but when you don't know what to look for, it's really good to be able to get as much as you can to play with it, and then decide whether or not you want to kind of pull yourself back. So as you can see in the game section, if you remember when I did my Slackle video, the only two games were a Guitar Hero style game and of course TuxRacer. Well, in this we have many more games available. You see I installed TuxRacer there, but it has things like a Pac-Man clone, K-Snake, if you remember K-Snake from the old days with Windows. I believe it even has the old bombing game that we go through, and you can see that there are a lot of different time wasters that you can grab and play with. Another nice thing that I like about Slackware is it does also bring up some of those old games. If I remember right, let me see here if I can get into console, for instance, here, and try Cribbage. And yes, there's Cribbage. I love Cribbage. It's been a long time since I've played it in the console version, but I think it's pretty cool that they still have that available, as well as a few other games. If we move on, we see that they do have the GIMP, which is one thing Slackle was missing, and as well as all of the other KDE applications. In the internet, it came with Firefox, not of course the newest one, because like I said, a lot of the packages within Slackware are older. It's not that difficult though if you want to go to the current repository to get many of the new versions available to you. It came with Conquer, which was something I had to special fix within Slackle to get. And of course it comes with Pigeon, Sea Monkey, Thunderbird, and the other types of internet applications you're used to seeing within KDE. In multimedia, I installed VLC because it did not have VLC, but it did have Amarok, it did have XMMS, it did have the M player, K player, and Dragon player, I believe, is in here somewhere too at the very bottom here. Now, one negative thing that I found was when I was first testing out my video recording and all that, it wanted to default to Dragon player, and Dragon player would not play the MP4s straight out of the box. But I could throw it at M player and immediately it would play. So no issues with that. The one nice thing about Linux is if one application gives you trouble, go to a different one because you have lots of different system files that you can go and use. And a very good example is I tried record my desktop with Slackware. It would not work. It would work, but the performance was so poor that you didn't want to use it. The FFmpeg was giving me problems with synchronization between the voice and the video, and now because of one of my subscribers telling me about Simple Screen Recorder, I'm able to use it with no problems whatsoever. So if one tool is not going to work within Linux, there are so many other great tools that have been developed out there that you can find something that will work. You just have to know where to look for it. Just like in this one, for instance, Amarok versus Clementine. Clementine's a more lightweight music player and manager. I like it a lot. It manages my screenshots of my CDs a lot better than Amarok does. But then again, Amarok has some great features, such as being able to bring in LibriVox. And LibriVox is a audiobook reader that can play different audiobooks that you can find that are out there in the public domain. And that's a neat feature too. So each have their pluses and deltas. We move on, of course, just like in I want to say Salix, but Slackle. They do use Calligra as the office. I will bring that up because it is interesting, a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. Now, one thing I did find out was that when I went to the blank documents before and chose the profile, it was doing this thing here, colorful documents, which was why it had the two columns. I was wondering if it was a brochure. I wasn't paying enough attention. I knew I didn't want to do a professional letter, but doing a custom document gives you your blank document here. You go ahead and say create, and then you have what you're typically used to seeing. This over here is what I like. It kind of gives you an option to set up all of your text editing features, fonts, how big the font should be, set your paragraph settings, and whether or not centered or right or left, alignment, etc. Interesting that they do not use LibreOffice, but it's also neat that something else that's out there that I wasn't aware of. I mean, I thought LibreOffice was the replacement for OpenOffice, and that's just it. And now by looking at this, we now see that Calligra is there. In here, I also installed Calibre. I think it's Calibre, which is a great ebook library manager. You can bring in your EPUBs, you can bring in your documents for the Amazon Kindle. You can get Plucker, I believe, in HTML, in all different types of formats with Calibre. An excellent ebook reader. Along with LibriVox, which is the audio version of a lot of books. I really like Gutenberg, which gives you public domain books that you can look at. And Calibre allows you to organize those and to read them very efficiently within Linux. We move on and look at the rest. Most of it's things that you will be familiar with if you're familiar with KDE type products. We have in there the contacts, address book, etc. Ocular for document just viewing. Most of what you're typically used to seeing. And of course, when we go into settings and system, everything is pretty much what you're also used to seeing. And here's where you're going to find when you install GSlapped and Sorcery. They'll be located within the system locations. Slackware is a really great OS. I've enjoyed learning, despite the fact that I spent a lot of time growling and screaming and rebooting and reinstalling and trying different things to make it all work. It's been interesting. It's definitely different. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. If you're still a beginner, Slackware is not for you to try unless you just want to throw it on there and not do anything else to change it. There's no real good way to do updates or know that there are updates out there. So what you have when you get it is pretty much what you're going to see until you go out and try on your own to get that. And that's another big thing about Slackware. It's strange. People who use Slackware, I'm told, are called slackers. And to me, a slacker is someone who sits back and doesn't want to do a lot of work. And that's just the opposite with Slackware. If you're going to maintain it properly and have it, you're going to end up doing a lot of work to make sure that you're getting what you want and that you're able to maintain your dependencies properly so that things don't go out of whack on you. Now, there are some groups out there that build packages for you. For instance, when I was looking for 4.10.4, I found one specific website that told you how you could go ahead and install it if you didn't want to change your repositories to the current versus the 14.0 Slackware version. And there were a few other websites out there too that gave source code for Slackware. Some things worked great, other things took a lot to get going and working. But if you can find the right repositories, you can use Slackware very easily. Now, I went ahead and threw this background on here for Slackware. It actually did come with something much smaller and, well, default for KDE. A lot of the stuff for KDE was pretty much base, bare bones, what you get if you had installed a vanilla flavor. That, for what it's all worth, is Slackware, which is a much better review than when I could give a Slackle. I apologize if that one didn't seem too polished. I gave up with trying to make a lot of things work within Slackle. And then, like I said, thank you very much to my subscribers. You guys help me a lot. When I want to be able to give these type of videos and discuss things to you, you guys help a great deal when I run into problems. In fact, before I start setting my thing up, I should send out SOS for this distribution. You guys that are out there, help me out. And then I can do a much better job. But that's why I decided to go ahead and do Slackware this week. Next week, I'll probably either look at a Debian distribution or I might go back to an Arch distribution just because I think Arch needs a lot more to look at. It's got a lot to offer. I think it has a lot of great potential. And I want to make sure that each week as I do a distribution, and like I told my wife, I hope to do 52 distributions in 52 weeks. I don't know what distribution I'm going to do when, and if you guys ever have ideas, feel free to let me know because I'm more than willing to try and do them. We'll see what we can do. And I will try to make them as best I can. I don't throw them in virtual boxes. I throw them on the system itself because I want to see what does the system do with it. I don't want to see what virtual drivers are making it happen do. I think it's more important to give you a better idea of how it's going to work. That said, I will say one quick thing about the installation. Slackware does not have a GUI-based install. When you first get into, if you use Slackware specifically, it's going to tell you to partition your hard drives, and you're going to have to be familiar with using CFDisk or have them partitioned prior. And then you're going to have to run setup at the command line, but it's going to take you through a command line GUI menu system, one step at a time, to make your choices and go forward. It's not difficult. It's not too scary. Just think of it as GUI for the command line and you'll be fine. Very easy to install. Nothing to be fearful. The only thing you want to watch out for is when you choose what partition you want to be your root and you tell it what you want it to be formatted as, be prepared that it's going to immediately format that partition and set it up for root before it goes on to the next step. None of this, are you sure, and is this the right thing? It's just going to do it. You got to be careful with that. But other than that, excellent, easy to install. When you do get through it, it does not take you into the GUI interface. And that's another thing about Slackware is it allows you to create a root account, but one of the first things you're going to want to do is create your user accounts. Now, if you don't know how to do that, you're going to have to look that up ahead of time so you can do it at the command line interface, or after you've rebooted and you have your Slackware up and running and you've logged in with the root account, you can just start X and it will take you into KDE, and then you can use K-users to create your users and then log out, log back in as your user, which is very important to do. Never ever good to run a Linux system as the root user full time. In fact, you'll run into programs that won't let you run those programs, like VLC, for instance, will not let you run VLC as the root, and other programs will do the same thing. So just a word of warning to anybody when you're trying out these things. If you decide that if you're trying out for 1 or 2 days, no big deal. But if you're going to keep it for a while, you'll want to create a user account, log in with that user account, and keep the root for only those specific tasks that require root capabilities. Well, as I always say, if it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you very much for your comments, your help, and everything that you give. I appreciate it greatly. I thank you all very much. Have a great one. Well, I'll talk to you later. Bye.